Good morning. Today is Tisvav Iyar Tovshin Pei Beis. We're on Teres Menachem Sefer Mamar Tovshin Yud Dalid in the first Mamar Zeh Hayom Tchilas Ma'asecha, and we are on page Dalid, 3 lines from the top. The line starts with the word Shekulam. We are by the comma, by the word Ubifrat. Briefly, the Rebbe here is discussing the phrase from the Musaf prayer of Rosh Hashanah where we say, Zeh Hayom Tchilas Ma'asecha Zikaron Liyom Rishon. This day is the beginning of your actions, and it commemorates the first day, meaning the first day of creation. And the Rebbe asked the famous questions: why how is it the beginning of your actions when it's the 6th day? It's the day when Adam was created, and he was created on the 6th day. And if indeed we mark Rosh Hashanah to commemorate the first day of creation, why is Rosh Hashanah set on the 6th day of creation? Let it be set on the first day. The Rebbe began to explain it's because there is the idea of Malchus, of kingship on Rosh Hashanah. The idea of Rosh Hashanah is to crown Hashem as a king, because every year we have to do that process again. The first time Hashem did it on his own, but since creation, we are responsible for that process taking place every year anew on Rosh Hashanah. And that happens through man. And therefore Rosh Hashanah is set and marked on the day man was created. And the Rebbe explained that the way the kingship, we make Hashem a king over us, over the worlds, is through everyone coming together as one. The Rebbe explained there's a difference. The 2 words for kingship or rulership: one is melucha, one is memshala. Kingship and rulership. Rulership can be by force. It doesn't have to be willingly. The people don't have to willingly. It can be imposed. Whereas kingship, you have to accept the king as a king. You have to crown him as a king, and that indicates willingness. People get together willingly, and they accept the king over them as their king. And that is, in that sense, everybody's united. You need the unity. The Rebbe quoted the pasuk, "Vahi b'Yeshurun melech bis asef roshi am yachad shiftei Yisrael." There was a king in Yeshurun. Yeshurun being Yisrael. It's another name for the Jewish people. The Jewish people have 3 names, as I mentioned: Yaakov, Yisrael, and Yeshurun. We'll discuss perhaps tomorrow the difference between the 3. There's another Mamar of the Rebbe where he explains in levels the difference between the 3. It's an ascending order, Yaakov being the lowest, Yeshurun being the highest. And it's Yachad Shiftei Yisrael. Everybody's together. And that's when there is a king, when everybody is together. And that happens on Rosh Hashanah. Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem, the parasha we read before Rosh Hashanah, Parshas Nitzavim, you are standing all together today steadfast. Lifnei Hashem Elokechem, before Hashem your God, mechet v'tzechem, rashechem shiftechem, from the highest levels, from the heads of your tribes, ad, remember it's 10 levels, until chet v'tzechem shevemecha, your wood choppers and your water carriers. Everybody stands united in this sense of accepting Hashem as a king. Now the Rebbe goes on and says, so he says, even though people are different, it doesn't mean everybody becomes the same. People remain different, but they're united in their mission, as it were, to crown Hashem as a king. Ubifrat, particularly, says the Rebbe, shehakabolas oilhim mitzat pnimiyus hanefesh, that the acceptance of the yoke of Hashem on Rosh Hashanah emanates from the innermost part of the soul. We know that the soul has 5 names, or if you will, 5 levels: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, and yechida, in ascending order. The first 3 are the more conscious elements of the soul, whereas the last 2 are the more esoteric or subconscious aspects of the soul. Right? We know that every day of the year we have this idea and the necessity of accepting the yoke of Hashem. As we say every day, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Right? Then we say, V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha, you should love Hashem, and so on and so forth. And then it says, V'hoyim Shemai, it starts talking about the mitzvahs. So the sages say in the Talmud, why that order? Because first we accept Hashem's yoke, We accept Hashem as king over us, and then we accept his commands. That's the normal way to do it, right? So every day of the year, we have this daily acceptance of the yoke of heaven. Kabbalos el Machar Shamayim. So what's the difference on Rosh Hashanah? That's what the Rebbe says here. Particularly on Rosh Hashanah, when the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, mitzat pnimis hanefesh, emanates from the very innermost aspects of the soul. Shezeu echad achilukim shebein hakabbalos el shebachol hashana. Ubein hakabbalos el sheberosh Hashanah. This is one of the differences between Shezeu echad achilukim. This is one of the differences shebein hakabbalos el shebachol hashana, between the acceptance of the yoke of Hashem during the entire year. Ubein hakabbalos el sheberosh Hashanah. The difference between that and the acceptance of Hashem's yoke on Rosh Hashanah, because as mentioned, we accept the yoke of heaven every day of the year. So what's the difference? What's special about Rosh Hashanah? The acceptance of Hashem's yoke on Rosh Hashanah comes from the very deepest elements of the soul. Right? Where are people different? People are different in the conscious aspects, the way they speak, the way they act, right? Their temperament, their character, and so on. Those are the revealed aspects of the soul. When it comes to the innermost aspects of the soul, especially when you go to the essence of the soul, we're basically all the same. And it's because it emanates from the deepest elements of the soul on Rosh Hashanah, the Kabbalah soil. This idea that the Rebbe mentioned before of the intermingling of everybody, each with each other, comes about. First of all, says the first of all, because what is it that is prevalent on Rosh Hashanah? It's the idea of the acceptance of the yoke, rather than, for example, a shiur, a class, or when people study together. So you have ones that understand better. There are differences. There are obvious differences between level. But when it comes to, first of all, Kabbalah soil itself, accepting Hashem's yoke, it's a very simple thing. Moshe Rabbeinu accepts the yoke of heaven, and a simple Jew accepts the yoke of heaven. So Kabbalah's oil, by its very nature, is something which is very similar between one individual and another one. There's little difference. In addition to that, so he says, first of all, because the idea is what? The acceptance of Hashem's yoke, which in general, every individual is equal. Everyone is equal. Particularly, even more so, when we talk about the place in the soul from where the acceptance of the yoke comes on Rosh Hashanah, which is what? Where's that place? Meaning innermost aspects of the soul, in which all are equal. It's like the Alter Rebbe says in chapter 32 of Tanya, how could one attain love for a fellow man? How could you love another individual like you love yourself? Because the love emanates from the soul. And when it comes to the soul, at the very essence of the soul, we're all equal. And it's through the fact that what is prevalent and present is the idea of the acceptance of Hashem's, the yoke of heaven, emanating from the innermost aspects of the soul. Through this, Atem Nitzavim Hayom, you are standing steadfast today, which is, as mentioned, Parshas Nitzavim, the first verse in Parshas Nitzavim, which we always read on the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah. When it says Hayom, today, so of course it refers in the simple sense to the day Moshe Rabbeinu was speaking. But as the Zohar says, when it says Hayom, without any description of which day it's referring to, the Stam Hayom Koyel Rosh Hashanah. When it just says Hayom, simply, it's a reference to Rosh Hashanah. That's why indeed, in the deeper sense, why we read Parshas Nitzavim before Rosh Hashanah, because it's a preparation for Rosh Hashanah. She'oz, by B'Shur Melech. Then on Rosh Hashanah, when everybody stands together with this acceptance of Hashem's yoke from the very deepest aspects of the soul, there is a king among Yeshurun. Hashem becomes the king. Shehu Hamshachas Malchusi Yisbarach, which is the idea of drawing down Hashem's kingdom, which takes place when? On Rosh Hashanah. So now going back to the question the Rebbe asked, why was Rosh Hashanah set to be marked on the day man was created? If the commemoration is to commemorate the beginning of creation, set it for the beginning of creation. Why set it for the sixth day? So that's what the Rebbe answers. This is the reason why indeed they set the day of Rosh Hashanah to be marked when? On the sixth day of creation, which is what? What took place on that day? Yom Broi Adam Arishon Dafka, specifically on the day the first man was created. Why? The Kiv and Rosh Hashanah whose manam shachas malchus is barech, because since Rosh Hashanah is the time when we draw down Hashem's kingdom, right? As mentioned before, that from the point of creation and forward, we have to accomplish that on our own initiative. Man has to accomplish that on their own initiative. And drawing down Hashem's kingdom every year anew. Specifically takes place, is accomplished through man, as mentioned before. That's why the day of Rosh Hashanah was set. Specifically on the day the first man was created. Why? Because it is the souls of Yisrael, through the service of Hashem, that Mamshichim draw down in Malchus the idea of Hashem's kingdom for the entire existence on the day of Rosh Hashanah. Another couple of lines?
Why not? You got plenty of time. Yeah.
So, this answers why Rosh Hashanah was set for the 6th day of creation. We need to shed more light why it is referred to Tchilas Masech at the beginning of your actions. Okay, I understand. You said marking Rosh Hashanah the 6th day because man is the one that accomplishes drawing down Hashem's kingdom. Perfect, understood. But how can you call it Tchilas Masecha, the beginning of your actions? Hashem started creation 6 days earlier, on day 1. That's what the Rebbe addresses now. Now here, this section is a little more Kabbalistic and more philosophical, so to speak. It talks about what Malchus, what the Sfira, what the attribute of Malchus is all about. And one of the points the Rebbe makes is, first of all, as we know, just by way of short introduction, that there are 10 Sfirot, 10 divine attributes: Chochmah, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. Malchus is the applier. Malchus takes everything from above and makes things happen. Creation is through Malchus. Hashem creates, but the applicator is Malchus. In that sense, one would think that Malchus reveals, right? It takes everything from above and it reveals it, which is true. But the way Malchus reveals is by concealing. Why do we need Malchus? Because the levels that are beyond Malchus are too powerful to be revealed in the lower realms. So, for example, in every Sphira, in every divine attribute, you have the Or, the energy, the giving energy, the light. And then you have the Keli, the Kli, the vessel, the receptacle. What's the purpose of the receptacle? It regulates, it contains, it limits. So in every attribute itself, you have a Malchus aspect. What's the Malchus aspect of every Sphira? The Keli. But the way the Keli works, on the surface, say, wow, it reveals. But the way it reveals, it's because there's a lot more that it conceals. So inherently, Malchus is a concealer. And it's because of that concealment that it is able to reveal what it reveals to the lower realms. In a certain sense, we'll flesh it out as we go through. It's a long chapter, and the Rebbe goes into addressing this, right? But I just wanted to give that as a general introduction, and then we'll try to work it out as we go along. Excuse me. This is also the reason why Rosh Hashanah is called the beginning of your actions. Because how does the existence of the world come about? Through Malchus. Rosh Hashanah is the idea of Malchus. And Malchus is what gives existence to the world. The creation of the worlds emanates from the idea of Malchus, specifically. What does this mean? Says the Rebbe, when it first came up in Hashem's desire to be king, meaning to say that he wants to create worlds, when Hashem decided, I want to be a king, he was awakened with a desire to create worlds. Why? There's no king without a nation. Now that's interesting, because every day we say in Adon Olam, Adon Olam Asher Molach, B'terem Kol Yitzur Nivra. Hashem was king. But then it goes on to the next verse. Le'eis nasa b'cheftzei koel. When the time came when everything was made according to his desire, azai melech shmei nikra, that's when he was called a king. So in a certain sense, the idea of Malchus Melucha existed even before the world existed, even before Hashem decided that he wants to create the world. And yet, when is he called a king? Only after the world is created. How does that work? What's the sense in that? And also he quotes another expression from Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. Before the world was created, it was Hashem's. He existed and his name existed. What does it mean, his name? A name, by definition, denotes. You think it would denote there's something other. What's a name? A name has no meaning on its own unless it's there for somebody to be able to identify you, to call you. So, in other words, the idea basically what it seems to be driving at is this. That on the one hand, it seemed to have existed even before the world was created. It seemed to have existed even before there was anybody else there, or there was a desire for anything else to be there. And at the same time, he needed it in order for it to come into effect. So the point that I was going to go in, which is a very subtle and fine point, is that there is essential malchus, which doesn't necessitate anything else out there, which is almost indiscernible or completely not discernible, which then gives rise to malchus in actuality. And if the former would not be there, then the latter would not be able to exist. And from there, the Rebbe is going to go into develop what the whole idea of malchus is in, and so on and so forth, and Rosh Hashanah. But we'll leave that for another day.